as a Pennsylvanian citizen. That's an entire year after the start of a war which was only expected to last a few months. And I admittedly only expected my services to be required for a few months. But now, yet another long year later, I find myself amongst the disheartedly mistaken. Here in Gettysburg, the bloodiest battle of this war, and the grounds for the most trying work of my life. En route north, I was prepared, as I have learned to be, for immense bloodshed and bloody work at a moment's notice. But I must say I was never prepared for something like this. Nor do I think I was alone in that. But as soon as we had crossed the border into Pennsylvania, we received word from General Howard to proceed quickly and without rest. And it was then that I knew that something terrible lay ahead. And the sight of smoke and the sound of cannon fire did well to aid in that assumption. It was high noon when we reached the heights above Gettysburg, the hill by the cemetery, and that commanded a most magnificent view of the entire battle, already raging. Already General Reynolds had fallen, and General Howard had for the time assumed his position. There were columns of infantry marching, evolutions of cavalry, and smoke of batteries. It was an awesome sight in the least. Particularly what caught my eye was General Longstreet's skirmishers, some 2 miles in length. Terrifying prospect for a surgeon, or I can't speak for the soldiers themselves. That day was spent by the surgeons seeking out a location for our hospital, which changed several times due to the complete inability of any of them to make a decision, and the encroaching enemy fire. It was finally definitively placed here in this large barn of a Mr. Spangler. And soon the wounded began pouring in, giving us such sufficient occupation that from the 1st of July till the afternoon of the 5th, I was not absent from the hospital more than once, and then but for an hour or two. I would rise at 2 a.m. to work incessantly until midnight. Here, you may try to rest. But I tell you, the sounds that these men make are the stuff of nightmares. A writer once said, and I think he said well, that the sweetest words in the English language are home, mother, and God. When you are awake at night listening to a man repeat these words over and over and over, you forgive a man for considering ways to shut him up. I saw one of my colleagues. We had at one of our 4 operating tables going day and night. He would stand there and he would heap a body onto the table, evaluate the corruption, remove it, file the bone, close the artery, remove the body, place the body, remove the corruption, remove the body. He could do this in another 7 minutes' time. Place the body, remove the body, place the body, remove the body. Those hands began to shake. And his eyes filled with tears, and he fell, proclaiming that this was more work than any man could endure. But here, you work, or nothing. You work until the job is done. Here we laid the Confederate wounded, here in the dirt, with little time to spread between them. And here in the barnyard we piled their limbs, with little time to bury them. Although Mr. Spangler's hogs made short work of what we had not time to bury. I remember once standing here, stuck in horror, watching them feast. And the sound of a man behind me on the ground I shall never forget, screaming to the pain of my arm. I can still feel them hogs got my arm. I doubt if I have ever worked harder at a more disagreeable occupation. Above us we held the Union men. On the day of the 3rd we dragged them below to be piled amongst the Confederate rebels there, Union men here. For fear that the barn would blaze from an artillery barrage of that day. We knew, or rather we hoped, that bringing them here with its stone walls would provide some protection. But all the while, dragging those men from above to below, I knew in the back of my mind that if the barn did blaze, so would the wood roof above our heads, and it would collapse and crush them all. I have endeavored in every extent of my human ability to preserve these men's lives, to save them. But in a time of war, when it is a man's occupation to remove life, saving it seems to be fool's work. I'll show you where we moved them from above. Follow me. And on the day of the 3rd, brought them below for fear the barn would blaze. We avoided that frightful casualty. A spray of shells came from this direction. I recall one falling about 20 yards from where I stood. I saw one tear one of my colleagues to bits. I am a surgeon and often behind the lines, and have never felt such a soldier's fear. On the day of the 4th, with victory at hand, there was a torrential rain which poured over 1,000 men on these grounds. Some we had indeed laid in the barnyard itself, where the foul water oozed into their very wounds. These were frightful conditions indeed. We had among us 3 colonels, and 1 Barlow, and 1 General Armistead, whom I had the pleasure of meeting here in this summer kitchen. Armistead, a great man, intelligent and refined. He was shot twice in the great rebel charge of the 3rd day, once in the soft of the leg above the knee, once in the start of the arm. Neither of these were fatal wounds, and I was certain he would recover, and swiftly. He once pulled a handful of raw corn from his pocket, and he held it to me. And he said, "Doctor, a man who can subsist on raw corn can never be whipped." You have to admire those Southerners for their fervor. But to my dismay and confusion, he passed not 2 days later, to what I can only assume was prostration. As he passed, he asked me to tell Hancock he was sorry. We buried him out here in this field, along with all the other men. The barn itself, as well as all our other supplies. In this, the 3rd year of the war, we were heavily undersupplied. What I could do for these men towards the end of it, I did with my hands alone. Sutured wounds with horsehair, administered ether until it was gone, chloroform, whiskey. When my services were no longer needed, I left on orders with my men on the 5th and spent that day strolling about the battlefield, seeing what I had not witnessed, what had caused me great anxiety over the past days. Trees turned to dust, the ground strewn with men, horses, blood, holes the size of duck ponds. The sights, the sounds, and the very smells still lingering there. Gettysburg! The first and only victory for this Army of the Potomac was over. Thank you, if you'll excuse me.